In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Please be seated. A story about a preacher who was vacationing out west with his wife, and they came across one of those echo canyons. The sign said that they would yell out, whatever they yell would bounce back from a distant ridge in the way of an echo. Well, the preacher was skeptical, so he shouted, "Baloney!" Sure enough, the echo bounced back with a very distinct baloney. He tried it again to yell baloney, and the echo once again said baloney. Well, then the preacher's pride got the best of him, and he yelled out, "I'm the greatest preacher in the world." He turned his ear for a response, and after a long pause, the echo came bouncing back, baloney. I suppose that each and every one of us need a good dose of humility every now and then, especially since we are constantly bombarded by every form of media today that tells us we deserve the very best because of who we are, that we are more special than anyone else in the entire world because of the clothes we wear, the food we eat, or the beer we drink, whether that humility sucks. And that's quite all right to beat our own drum so that the rest of the world can hear us. And all of this, I'm afraid, has resulted in a mass epidemic of false pride, believing that we are something or someone other than what we are not. Some time ago, I noticed one of my grandchildren watching a television channel designed to attract young people. An advertisement for a shoe store was saying this: decide who you want to be. Go to the XYZ store, and for $89.95, a new pair of ABC shoes will change you forever. I'm afraid that life-changing experiences are a little more complicated than that, and I can assure you that $89.95 invested in a new pair of sneakers will do very little to make you someone else. This idea of becoming someone or something that we are not is creating an epidemic of false pride. This excessive preoccupation of ostentatious pride in oneself or one's vanity is simply wrong, and that's what Jesus was telling us about in today's gospel lesson. Entertainers, athletes, and politicians have created this false aura that is changing the way in which ordinary people simply look at themselves. I personally believe that it's a great danger that faces our generation today, one that continues to build upon this idea of false pride. You know, in the list of 7 deadly sins, pride was the first one on the list. And it's exactly that kind of pride that Jesus spoke to us about in today's gospel lesson. In today's lesson, Jesus tells us about this Pharisee who certainly thought that of all the things he did, he had conjured up a mighty good impression of himself. This Pharisee said, "I thank thee, God, that I am not as other men, especially as this other publican here. After all, I'm not an extortioner. I don't rob, steal, blackmail, or intimidate to get what I want. And furthermore, I don't run around with loose women while you go to church every week, fast, and often give 10% of everything I own. Lord, because of this, I'm head and shoulders above this publican over there." You know, the publican came back with this reply: "Lord, I'm just a sinner, and I ask for your mercy." You remember what the serpent said to Eve in the Garden of Eden? The Garden of Eden. If you will just eat this forbidden fruit, you can be like God. pride, you see, played a vital part in the original sin and fall of Adam and Eve. I don't know if you remember Bishop Fulton J. Sheen. He always, the days of black and white television, appeared in his full bishop's regalia and gave these wonderful homilies. He once said, "Pride is the king of all vices. It is the first of the pallbearers of the soul. Other vices may destroy only their opposite virtues. As wantonness destroys chastity, as greed destroys temperance, as anger destroys gentleness. But pride," he said, pride destroys all virtue. C.S. Lewis, the great Anglican theologian and writer, called pride a spiritual cancer that eats up the very possibility of love and contentment and every other bit of common sense. How do we go about avoiding the pitfalls of pride? Well, first of all, we have to confess and repent. Now, we do this publicly every Sunday in church, but there's 6 other days of the week that I hope and pray that each of you fall on your knees and ask for forgiveness. In my case, I pray out to do it more than once a day. This ought to be pretty obvious from the parable that Christ used in today's gospel. You see, the publican got it right. "Lord, I'm just a sinner." And that's true of all of us. It was a simple statement from a simple man, and the publican got it right. And if he understood that principle, so can anyone else who's willing. When we confess, then we have to make sure that we are completely cleansed. We have to pray that God will rid us of all of our sins, both known and unknown. You know, in addition to all of the bad things that we know about ourselves, sometimes we need to ask God to purify that great void of pridefulness that we may not be aware of or be willing to believe about ourselves. David wrote in the 19th Psalm, "Lord, cleanse me from my secret faults." Pride is often an unseen danger in our Christian walk. It's somewhat like an iceberg. The most dangerous part of who we are sometimes lies beneath the surface of what people see. Then we have to learn to take ourselves not too seriously. So many people in today's society are hung up on themselves and they fail to see the rich diversity that abounds around them. This Pharisee in today's gospel lesson obviously thought a great deal of himself. He was absolutely impressed with the kind of fellow he was. Listen to what St. Paul tells us in the 12th chapter of Romans. "For I say, through the grace given unto me, to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, according as God has dealt to every man a measure of faith." In other words, just not to think too highly of ourselves. Think less of who we are. And above all else, the best way to resist the temptation of pride is to remain humble. Jesus Christ is the greatest example of humility the world has ever known. He took the form of a servant, even to the point of washing his disciples' feet. Servants are certainly not above their master. It's very easy to get caught up in prideful thinking about oneself. Of course, we all want to feel good about ourselves, but not to the point of letting our pride give us false impressions of who we really are. Through the centuries, however, this pride has become rather confusing, so that we have to draw a line between what true pride is and false pride is. True pride has to do with acknowledging and respecting who you are and what you can do without any outside confirmation or approval. We can be prideful about our church. We can be prideful about the kind of work we do. We can be prideful of the kind of citizens we are in our community. We don't require any outside approval for that kind of pride. On the other hand, false pride has to do with claiming more about who you are. The kind of pride almost always requires some outside confirmation or approval to cover up our feelings of inadequacy. Friends, an awful lot of prideful people in this world today. We have to always remember who we are, that whoever we are and whatever we may be are because of God's grace and because of His blessing in our lives. When someone asks you who you are, the correct answer is, I'm just a sinner. Amen. Remember the words of our Lord.